Story 5. I was on my last day of backpacking through Austria. It was an unusually hot day. I had blisters all over my feet and I was ready to call it quits. But then I remembered that I still had some money left, so I decided to thumb lift to the nearest train station for Vienna. I stood there for hours and no car would pick me up. Finally, a truck pulled over and the driver asked me where I was going. When I told him the train station, he said he would take me to Vienna. I got in the truck and we talked on the way, and he seemed like a polite guy until we got to our first stop. He got out of the truck to load his cargo, and I bought a little bottle of water at the gas station nearby. I had declined drinks he offered me a few times because I just didn't feel comfortable with that. I got back in the truck and we continued driving to Vienna. But almost immediately, he told me that it wouldn't be a problem for him if I wanted to take some clothes off since it was such a hot day, and I declined. He brought it up a couple more times. After some time, I noticed a man glaring at us from his car. The truck driver yelled at me to put my head down and hide as he didn't want him to see me with him. This only made me curious about why he was hiding me. I asked him to drop me off at the next stop, and I made up an excuse. I wanted to walk to Vienna by myself. He agreed and I got my stuff ready. But then he turned to me and said that he thought he had seen me before. He said he was sure he saw me at a swinger club. I told him it was impossible because I had never been to one. I told him I didn't want to go with him and asked him to drop me off. He didn't answer, but started masturbating while he was driving. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I thought about jumping off the truck, but he stopped at a gas station and asked if we could shower together. I thought that it would be easier to get rid of him if people were around, so I told him okay. He drove up, and as soon as he stopped, I opened the door and ran across the parking lot at the gas station. I was relieved when he didn't come after me. Then I started walking barefoot to Vienna, keeping an eye out for his truck. Story 4. 2 years ago, I was driving back to college from my parents' house. The 3-hour trip seemed longer than usual. As I made my way out of town, there were a few small strips along the road, but other than that, it was just endless fields. The hitchhiker caught my attention as he was walking in the same direction as mine. I knew right away this man needed a lift. He asked if I was going in that direction, and I was. The stranger named a nearby town before getting into the car's front seat. I had the radio on, so we didn't just sit in the awkward silence. In a few minutes, I started thinking that maybe this wasn't such a good idea. The guy was complaining and groaning in pain while holding his stomach with both hands open. I told him not to worry and open the window if he wanted some air or needed help immediately, but he never ended up doing anything about it. This guy next to me was swaying back and forth with a groan. I tried focusing on the radio, but he said, "I really don't feel good. Take the third next exit." I remember those being his exact words at the moment. When I asked the guy if he just wanted me to pull over for a second, he said no. The exit he said was the third one from now seems kind of suspicious, especially since it's always been my habit when driving with someone else who is sick or injured in some way that they immediately want me to stop and let them out. I agreed to take the exit, but there was no rest area in sight. When I pulled over on the side road, he said no, keep going. When he told me to stop, I knew something was off. He got out and disappeared into the darkness. Within seconds, 5 hooded figures walking towards my car with weapons ready for battle were now charging towards my vehicle. Fortunately, I was able to get out of there safely and got back to my dorm. I called the police and there were bullet holes in the back of my car. It made me think that whoever was shooting aimed at the tires, but I will never know for sure. I still remember the day when 5 gunshots rang out. 2 hit my back windshield, but even then, I never picked up another hitchhiker after that. Story 3. This is a story that an old family friend, Alex, told me when I was a kid. The story is about hitchhiking and what can happen. I never forget, and it even makes me feel sick to think about it. Alex grew up at the same time as my dad, so this was around the early 80s. She's always willing to help out other people in need. So when she saw a man walking down the side of the road, she decided to pick him up. He was hitchhiking, so he stuck out his arm and thumb. When the guy tossed his bag into the back seat and buckled up for the ride ahead, Alex gave him a smile before opening her passenger door. They talked pleasantly on most topics, friends, news, etc. You know how small talk goes. She felt that they were getting along very well, even buying dinner at one of those pit stops halfway there to make things more interesting, and she said he seemed really flustered when she paid. As soon as they got into the city, he thanked her profusely for taking him home and eating dinner with him before asking to be dropped off. Once downtown, before getting out, he requested Alex's phone number so that one day maybe they can catch up. When Alex tells me this next part, I can see the crease on her forehead and an odd look in her eyes. A week later, when she got a phone call from a man she had picked up at that stopover, not letting any words come out edgewise after hello before telling how thankful he was for being raised so nicely, because if it wasn't for God preventing him raping or murdering them, neither one of us would not be here today talking about what happened back there. It sounds like something straight out of a scary movie. The man's final words on the phone were, "Please, Alex, never ever pick up another hitchhiker." And so I've learned one important thing from this story, that after treating Nice with kindness and even going out to dinner for her sake, he couldn't bring himself to do it. The man hung up without leaving any contact information or explaining why he was canceling their conversation just as soon as they had started talking. It didn't matter though, because by then there were no more calls coming through at all. Story 2. The legend of Lydia is a story that has been around for decades, though it only came to light in recent years. The story of the ghost of Lydia is part of a cultural myth known as the Vanishing Hitchhiker. The spirit originally began as an urban legend and then became more than just gossip at parties when people started claiming they had seen or heard about this girl hitchhiker, dressed all white, who would stand by the road looking into their car windows on rainy nights seeking help from drivers passing by. The ghost is believed to be that of a young woman who died tragically at the bridge many years ago from a fatal car accident. A driver claims that he saw a girl dressed in white clothing. She signed for him to stop, and he asked if he could get on board, but when she got home and got out of the car, it seemed like she turned into mist before his eyes. When he knocked on the door of that house, asking if she was there, he learned from her mother that she had lost their daughter at this very location from a car accident. When local researchers came upon an article in the Greensboro Patriot from June 21, 1920, that reported the tragic death of a young woman named Annie Jackson, who had been killed on High Point Road near Lakeview Cemetery, might this be where her ghost originates? The reporter noted how wet roads caused them to turn turtle, and it is believed that she died as well, because there are no other surviving records mentioning either person lived. Story 1. On January 6, 1982, Bobby Oberholzer hitchhiked to work as she always did. That evening, after calling home and telling her husband Jeff that she would be getting a ride later in the night. However, the following morning she didn't come back. Bobby Oberholzer's husband Jeff went out in search of his wife and found out she left the bar at 7:30 p.m. The farmers who found Bobby's ID later that day also discovered her body in a secluded field. She had been shot twice, and it is believed she was murdered. When a girl by the name of Annette Schnee was reported missing the same day as Bobby, her body was found dumped in the woods 6 months later. She had been shot and sexually assaulted. Shockingly, she wore an orange sock like those that were found near Bobby's murder scene. When the police finally found a car belonging to none other than Jeff Oberholzer, Bobby's husband came under suspicion for both murders. He claimed innocence and then had picked up hitchhiking alongside his wife just days before she went missing, but it would be 10 years before DNA testing would later clear him as well. Initially, the police believed that the blood found on tissues in Bobby's gloves came from her. However, in 1990s DNA testing determined blood was male based upon several alibi witnesses, who also worked to clear Jeff as a suspect for these murders over 2 decades ago. When 70-year-old Alan Lee Phillips was arrested on February 24, 2021 for the murders of 3 people and attempted murder of another, he had yet to speak a word. It wasn't until investigators used genetic genealogy that they were able to find his DNA evidence to an unknown suspect in this case by taking samples from various family members before narrowing it down to just one person: him. The day after committing the murder, Phillips was rescued from nearby Guanella Pass after his truck got stuck there. Scratches were noticed on his face, but he claimed they occurred during an accident with snowfall that night, so maybe not too surprising.